Happy Friday, Hokie Nation. As always, welcome back to another edition of the Friday Q&A. As it's been an interesting week for Virginia Tech with their upcoming matchup against Wofford, we're here to answer all of your burning questions. Before we get into it, some introductions. I'm Robert Bateman, joined alongside by Chris Coleman, and behind the scenes, as always, is Nick Brown. Ready to get into it?
Let's start.
All right, so our first question comes from Hank the Hokie 24, who wants to know, with the portal being open to the team and redshirting still an option, what player is it most crucial for the roster to maintain? And on the flip side, who will it hurt the most to see go?
That's a good question. I think there are some good young players in this program. Your Emmett Laws, who I think has played very well at a defensive tackle so far. Now, he's already redshirted, so he's not like an imminent threat to transfer, I don't think, because there would be no point for it. Other guys like that are Keelan Adams, Chance Wiggins, guys who have already redshirted. We probably won't find anything about their status to the end of the year, but they're guys who I think I'd very much like to keep because I do think they're good prospects, particularly Laws. You've got some other guys like true freshmen, like you've seen JoJo Krim and Knowledge Harrell get in there this past week, and they'll still have a few more games. I think they've only each played in one game. So they've got 3 more games where they can play in and still redshirt and still enter the portal within that 30-day rule. So you might not hear anything from those young guys for a while. And those are 2 more that I really want to keep. Some of your older players who didn't redshirt that have already played in the first 3 games. So they'll play in their 4th game this weekend. And if they're going to leave, you might hear something. You'd probably hear something next week, most likely, if they wanted to do that and take a red shirt. Caleb Woodson, Quentin Reddish, guys like that. And I think those guys are talented football players. I don't know that Woodson's really like an inside linebacker, but I think there's a good football player in there. I just don't think he's been well coached since he's been here. Quentin Reddish is, again, I believe, a talented football player. Virginia Tech hasn't been well coached. Sometimes it's hard to tell how good a player is until you get a good coach in there, and then the player starts to play better because he's better coached. But those are some guys that I would very much like to keep. Unfortunately, in a situation like this, you're not going to keep everybody. But in some situations, some player turnover, Virginia Tech is going to be good because whoever Virginia Tech hires, he's going to have some guys to bring in on his own, especially if you hire a guy who's already coaching somewhere. Like, obviously, if you just throwing this name out here, I'm almost certain that it won't happen. But let's say it was Jimbo Fisher, right? He's not coaching anywhere. It's not like he can bring a bunch of players from his current team to Virginia Tech, whereas if you hired someone currently coaching somewhere, they could potentially bring some guys from their current program to Virginia Tech, sort of like Curt Cignetti did when he got to Indiana and brought, 15, 18 JMU guys or something like that, brought those guys with him and won a bunch of games immediately. So some room will have to be made for guys like that, like it or not.
At what point in the season do we see the young guys that might not necessarily get playing time, if the team was competitive, start to get in and get more reps as the season goes on?
You'll probably see it some tomorrow if the game goes as it should go. But I think there's a lot of young guys on this team who could be playing and helping that we'll see their playing time increase. Not because, and I think that would have happened anyway. Like, even if Virginia Tech was playing well, even if Brent Pry hadn't gotten fired, JoJo Krim got in there last week. Knowledge Harrell got in there last week. I assume at some point that Keelan Adams is going to be healthy. But we haven't heard anything about that recently. So those are some guys to keep an eye on. But I don't think Virginia Tech is going to start just throwing young guys in there just for the sake of it. They've got to be guys that they feel like can help them.
Well, all right. Our next question comes from Borat from Kazakhstan, who asked, any thoughts on how Monty has looked in his first week so far? I saw him at Tech Talk Live last night, and he seemed very confident and reassuring in where the team is despite the hectic week.
Smart question from a smart man. I like Monty as a head coach. I think he's calm. I think he'll bring a steady hand that Virginia Tech needs. I know they've rearranged some practices. It really seemed like on Wednesday that they started a practice on time, or maybe even early, because he was actually early to interviews. Interviews actually ended before they were supposed to start, as opposed to an hour later, like we saw in the past. So I think he's going to bring a more organized approach. I think there was a standing room only at Tech Talk Live last night, which shows that the fan base wants to get behind him, and they were ready to move on. still a fantastic fan base. I don't think there are very many wins on the table for Virginia Tech this year, but I believe there will be more with Montgomery at the helm than there would have been if they'd stuck with Pry.
All right. Well, Baldboy972 said, what is the best case scenario for the rest of the season? I feel hopeful with Montgomery's past experience, but I'm curious how my shiny head brothers, thanks, feel going into the last 3 quarters of the season.
I think if you look at Virginia Tech's schedule, it's probably a little more difficult than we first thought it would be. I mean, Virginia Tech's ACC opponents currently have a combined record of 20-2. Now, Wake Forest is not going to be a great football team, and I think NC State's 3-0 record is probably not quite who they are as a football team. But that being said, Florida State's better than I thought they would be. Miami looks good. It's Miami. Who knows when they'll screw up, but they look good. UVA looks better than we thought they would look. Just on paper, it doesn't look like there's that many opportunities for wins. They're going to beat Wofford this week. It's really hard for me to envision them winning more than 2 ACC games right now, to be completely honest with you. But we have to wait and see how they look. And as we all know throughout time, teams change, teams evolve over the course of a season as their strengths and weaknesses get figured out, or they have coaching changes. I mean, we always bring up the Georgia Tech comparison about how they were dead in the water, and then they fired Jeff Collins after 3 or 4 games that year, and immediately started playing competitive football under Brent Key, who eventually got the job full time and has done a fantastic job. So it's amazing sometimes what just a coaching change can do. Sometimes that's just what you need, and clearly it's what Virginia Tech needed.
So people have been talking a lot about wanting J.C. Price to come in, be the interim. They went with Montgomery. Do you have any thoughts on that overall situation?
He's been a head coach for over 90 football games in his life. That's 90 times you're on the sideline and you have to know when to use timeouts. 90 times on the sideline when you have to manage a game. It's just so much experience there. And JC would have been, obviously a popular choice because, he beat UVA last time and everything. But right now, I think to get the most out of this team and just to steady the players for the future. Not everybody's going to stay, obviously, but some are. And so the process starts now as far as turning these guys into better football players. You put a little bit more trust into somebody with as much head coaching experience as he has than you would someone who's only been a head coach for 3 games.
I'm definitely curious to see just how the locker room rallies around Montgomery, and it feels like this is the perfect week to do it with Wofford coming to town.
Yeah, thank goodness you're playing them and not like Florida State this week. But Montgomery's a good guy. He's a likable guy. I don't think there's going to be any issues there.
And then our final question comes from Bobby Big Time 16, who wondered, how will Montgomery being head coach impact his play calling?
That's a good question, and it can be hard to tell. On the surface, probably won't, because, as a head coach or there's an offensive coordinator, the types of plays you're going to call in certain situations against certain, defensive linemen and things like that. Where it could change is that, as a head coach, you're trying to look at the bigger picture, so you're thinking about your defense as well. And, is it better to just run it right here and punt it so our defense can, the other team has the ball at the 15, right? I think you have to really think about things like that as a head coach. And with him now covering both roles, you could see a little bit of the head coach thinking bleed into play calling. Or maybe we won't at all. It's hard to say, but that is one way that it could change things slightly, because you do have to think of a bigger picture as a head coach. Even if as offensive coordinator you want to do certain things, you also have to think about your defense as well, and field position and how it impacts things over the entire game.
It feels like you're saying it almost helps us. Do you think it helps or hurts that he's going to be thinking about the whole team?
I don't think it hurts. Ideally, I want my offensive coordinator just thinking about offense, and then it's and then when he calls a play and the head coach can get in his ear and say, "Whoa, I'm vetoing that play because we need to think about this." Well, there won't be a head coach in his ear because he is the head coach, right? So it's an interesting dynamic, and it's one that we've never had to experience here at Virginia Tech before. I want to say maybe like in the 94 Gator Bowl when Virginia Tech didn't have an offensive coordinator, that Beamer called plays for part of that game. I don't know, but it's just not something we've had to deal with. It's going to be an interesting dynamic. I'd say it's something we could study, but I don't know if there will be enough evidence either way to prove that it changes anything.
Well, Tech Sideline is presented by First Bank and Trust Company. Manage your money with ease. First Bank and Trust Company's industry-leading digital banking experience provides you with all the essential tools to manage your full banking relationship from one convenient platform. Access digital banking through the online banking login on desktop and tablet devices, or on the go through the First Bank and Trust Company mobile banking app. Who you choose to bank with can make all the difference. Choose First Bank and Trust Company with over 30 locations in Virginia, North Carolina, and Tennessee. Well, that's all we have for you this week. As always, be sure to check out all of our socials, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and the YouTube page if you want more on what with Babcock's situation is or potential coaching hires for the future. We have those on the podcast later in the week. If you want some betting lines, we have buy or sell as well. And really anything that you could want, we have on our YouTube or socials. That is all we got for you now. Drop any questions for future weeks down below in the comment section if you want to be featured on the video. For Chris Coleman, a big thank you to Nick Brown behind the scenes as always. I'm Robert Bateman, and we'll see you guys next week.